All right. Hi, everyone. It looks like it's been a hot minute since I have really done any kind of live streaming or podcasting, whatever you call this. Um, yeah, Leonard's been out. He's some my issues or something, but this isn't about space today. Going to be reading some new books that I got. I was trying to get this elephant thing up. Let me just show you. So I got this actually a few weeks ago. Uh, I was trying to get it up there, but I failed since apparently these walls you can't really drill holes in them, and if you do, it doesn't go very far. So that aside, no, anyways, I have some wacky idea on using that and putting some things in there, but let's just see what we got here. So this book, Solve the Night, Chet Ramo. Its elegant essays link the mysterious phenomena of the night sky with the human mind and spirit as he ranges through the realms of mythology, literature, religion, history, and anthropology. All right, I figured I'd just read like one page from them, and then see really how it goes. So I'm just all right. The first page, I'm skipping the preface here. It's called The Silence. Well, actually, the first chapter. It's a really weird picture. I don't know what this is supposed to be depicting, but yeah, just take a look at that. Yesterday on Boston Common, I saw a young man on a skateboard collide with a child. The skateboarder was racing down the promenade and smashed into the child with full force. I saw this happen from a considerable distance. It happened without a sound. It happened in dead silence. The cry of the terrified child as she darted to avoid the skateboard and the scream of the child's mother at the moment of impact were absorbed by the gray wool of the November day. The child's body simply lifted up into the air and in slow motion, as if in a dream, floated above the promenade, bounced twice like a rubber ball, and lay still. All of this happened in perfect silence. It was as if I were watching the tragedy through a telescope. It was as if the tragedy were happening on another planet. I've seen stars exploding in space, colossal, planet-shattering, distanced by light years, framed in the cold glass of a telescope, utterly silent. It was like that. During the time the child was in the air, the spinning earth carried her half a mile to the east. The motion of the earth about the sun carried her back again 40 miles westward. The drift of the solar system among the stars of the Milky Way bore her silently 20 miles toward the star Vega. The turning pinwheel of the Milky Way galaxy carried her 300 miles in a great circle about the galactic center. After that huge flight through space, she hit the ground and bounced like a rubber ball. She lifted up into the air and flew across the galaxy and bounced on the pavement. It is a thin membrane that separates us from chaos. The child, sent flying by the skateboarders, bounced in slow motion and lay still. There was a long pause. Pigeons froze against the gray sky. Promenaders turned to stone. Traffic stopped on Beacon Street. The child's body lay inert on the asphalt like a piece of crumpled newspaper. The mother's cry was lost in the space between the stars. How are we to understand the silence of the universe? They say that certain meteorites, upon entering the Earth's atmosphere, disintegrate with noticeable sound. But beyond the Earth's skin of air, the sky is silent. There are no voices in the burning bush of the galaxy. The Milky Way flows across the dark shoals of the summer sky without an audible ripple. Stars blow themselves to smithereens. We hear nothing. Millions of solar systems are sucked into black holes at the centers of the galaxies. They fall like feathers. The universe fattens and swells in Big Bang, a fireball of creation exploding from a pinprick of infinite energy, the ultimate firecracker. There is no soundtrack. The membrane is ruptured. A child flies through the air, and the universe is silent. In Catholic churches between Good Friday and Easter Eve, the bells are stilled. Following a 12th century European custom, the place of the bells is taken by instruments des ténèbres, instruments of darkness, wooden clackers and other noisemakers that remind the faithful of the terrifying sounds that were presumed to have accompanied the death of Christ. It was unthinkable that God should die and the heavens remain silent. Lightning crashed about the darkened hill of Calvary. The veil of the temple was loudly rent. The earth quaked and rocks split. Stars boomed in their courses. This din and thunder, according to medieval custom, are evoked by the wooden instruments. Yesterday, on Boston Common, a child flew through the air, and there was no protest from the sky. I listened. I turned the volume of my indignation all the way up, and I heard nothing. Wow, that is actually quite touching, this beginning. Anyways, that's a little snippet from The Soul of the Night, which is the only astronomy book that I actually got this time. So this other one, called Steering the Craft, a 21st century guide in sailing the sea of story by Ursula K. Le Guin. It came highly recommended, at least on the Amazon reviews. And so this is Ursula Le Guin. Ursula K. Le Guin, if you haven't heard, writes pretty well. So, and this is the guide that Ursula wrote for people who wants to tell stories, which I definitely want to tell stories. So, okay, so this is from the introduction. I will read just a page from that. This book. This is a handbook for storytellers, writers of narrative prose. I want to say up front, it is not a book for beginners. It's meant for people who have already worked hard at their writing. 15 or more years ago, I was getting students in my workshop who were serious, talented writers, yet were afraid of semicolons and likely to confuse a point of view with a scenic vista. They needed to learn technique, to work on the craft, to get some navigational skills before they took the boat out across the Pacific. So in 1996, I developed a workshop called Steering the Craft, focused on the glamorous aspects of writing, the really sexy stuff, punctuation, sentence length, grammar, ... That 5-day workshop drew 14 intrepid writers, willing to face any semicolon and tame any verb tense. Their input and feedback were invaluable to me. Using my notes and their responses, I turned the workshop into a book, a self-guided set of discussion topics and exercises for a writer or small group. Carrying on the title metaphor, I call them The Lone Navigator and the Mutinous Crew. Steering the Craft was published in 1998. It met with an enthusiastic reception and sold steadily for about 10 years. By then, both writing and publishing were changing so fast that I began to think about updating the book. I ended up rewriting it from stem to stern. It's still aimed at story writers who seek thought, discussion, and practice in the fundamentals of narrative prose. The sound of it, punctuation, syntax, the sentence, the verb, the adjective, voice, and point of view, direction and indirection, what's included and what's left out. Each chapter includes a discussion of the topic, examples of it from good writers, and exercises offering the reader guidance in avoiding pitfalls, practicing control, and a sense of the pleasure of writing, of playing the real great word games. All the material has been rethought, made clearer, more accurate, and more useful to writers of the 21st century. The exercises profited from a great deal of feedback from users of the book, reporting on which ones worked and which ones didn't, on clarity or confusingness of direction, and so on. Peer group workshops are now so important to so many writers that I enlarged my discussion of them and suggestions for how to make them work and included more about online groups. All right, and then there's more. But this seems like a pretty good book, so I look forward to actually reading it to hone the technical skills of my writing. So with that was one package. All right, let me open up this one now, since I have not opened this. I don't know why they delivered it. Okay. They delivered it to me in 3 different packages for some reason. All right, so this one's called Craft in the Real World by Matthew Salisis. I don't know who that is. But it says, the traditional writing workshop was established with white male writers in mind. What we call craft is informed by their cultural values. In this bold reevaluation of the elements of fiction writing, including plot, characterization, conflict, and structure, and aspects of workshop, including the silenced writer and the imagined reader, Matthew Salisis asks, how can we invite diverse storytelling traditions into literary spaces? Teachers will find suggestions for syllabi grading and introducing new methods to the classroom. Students will find revision and editing guidance. drawing from examples including 1001 Nights, Curious George, and the Asian American classic No, No, Boy. Salicus reminds us, when we write fiction, we write the world. All right, so I guess no more white men in terms of, I don't know. I don't think I write like a white male, but who knows? I suppose if I read enough books by white males, I may not be doing it right. So got this book, see what it says. All right. I suppose in this case, since the author did write the preface, I will actually, you know what? I'm skipping the preface. Yeah, all right. So I'm just going to start from part 1, where it says fiction in the real world, and flip the page, and I read the first page there. Pure craft is a lie. Like many creative writing instructors, I teach my students that it can be to their advantage in fiction to use the dialogue tags say and ask instead of less common tags like commented or queried. This is a strategy I myself was taught. The usual reasoning goes like this. The tags say and ask are effectively invisible to readers, so they take the reader's focus off the tag and put it on who is talking. Most of the time, the main purpose of a dialogue tag is to indicate who has spoken. Tags also provide rhythm and other benefits, but let's focus on the main purpose. I tell my students that if the main purpose of a particular tag is not who is speaking, but how the character speaks, such as in shout or whisper, then those dialogue tags, she shouted, they whispered, become useful for the very fact that they are not, quote unquote, invisible. Readers are meant to register the way of speaking as much or more than who is doing it. When writers use say or ask, it isn't to get readers to register the fact that something is said or asked. The dialogue already makes this obvious. I believe this advice to be useful and true. I also know that it is cultural. We read say and ask as invisible terms, not, of course, because they are invisible, and not because of their meaning, commented and curated would do in this regard, but because we have read other books that also use say and ask. We read the words say and ask a lot, so much that we barely notice them. To be clear, if every writer in America started using the word curried, the American readers will start to treat curried as invisible. That's Queuried, by the way. That is the influence of culture. Our exposure to culture is what makes our advice on dialogue tags advisable. To learn craft is to learn how to use cultural expectations to your advantage. Craft works best then when a writer and reader share the same cultural background. If a writer were to use ask in cultural where curried is an invisible term, then ask would draw attention to itself. It will lose its value as invisible. A reader who picks up her first literary novel in English will often question why an author repetitively writes say and ask instead of changing it up with synonyms. Many primary schools teach children to avoid repetition. One real benefit is to improve children's vocabulary. I've had the experience of assigning a Hemingway to ESL readers, thinking of his simplicity, only for them to ask why Hemingway is such a bad writer. Why the hell does he keep using the same dialogue tags over and over? Why doesn't he know any bigger words? I use the example of dialogue tags for its relative straightforwardness, but cultural expectations also apply to how we characterize why some characters are called unsympathetic and others are not, how we plot by causation and agency rather than by coincidence, how we emphasize conflict, how we expect characters to change or at least actively fail to change, etc. If not everything about fiction is cultural, so how could it not be when language is cultural? Certainly any aspect of craft that relies on shared meanings relies on shared culture. This is why aspiring writers should read a lot, and why artists learn art history, and why certain fiction gets grouped together into terms like modernism or fantasy. Here's a quick thought experiment. Imagine a writer from a culture that uses Curie, Q-E-R-Y, enrolls in creative writing workshop in our quote-unquote ask culture. How much would the repetition of Curie frustrate the workshop? The writer might even be convinced to use ask from then on. What's the problem with that? To switch to using ask is to switch audiences. Ask is not for readers from the writer's Curie culture, but for the workshop. Suddenly, the writer has changed allegiances. We must be careful not to frame craft as prescription or even guidelines without first making it clear where those guidelines come from and whom they benefit. In many workshops, in many craft books, the dominance of one tradition of craft serving one particular audience, parentheses, white, middle class, straight, able, etc., is essentially literary imperialism, a term that should make us wary of the danger, especially to emerging minority and marginalized voices. All right, that is actually quite beautiful. I think I definitely want to read this one. I read like 3 pages right there, so that was not expected. And then lastly, let's see what this book's got to say. So this one, has a beautiful cover. The Emotional Craft of Fiction: How to Write the Story Beneath the Surface by Donald Mass. All right. Every fiction writing guide offers its own set of beliefs, techniques, and methods for crafting a novel, developed from the values a particular instructor deems necessary for powerful prose. But while writers might disagree over showing versus telling or plotting versus pantsing, none would argue this. If you want to write strong fiction, you must make your readers feel. The reader's experience must be an emotional journey that aligns with your character's struggles, discoveries, and triumphs. That's where the emotional craft of fiction comes in. Veteran literary agent and expert fiction instructor Donald Nass shows you how to connect readers viscerally and emotionally to your characters and your story. All right. So, it's pretty hyped up, so I don't know how good it is. Okay. Wow, look at this kind of very incredible, interesting table of contents here. It's pretty beautifully designed. All right, so chapter 1, just read one page from there. The Emotional Craft of Fiction, which is also the name of this book, actually. The world of fiction writers is a collection of opposites, factions at odds in their beliefs, values, purpose, and way of writing. Some authors have commercial intent, others literary. Some outline, others explore story in successive drafts. For some, genre is a badge of pride. For others, it is a hateful label. Prestige matters greatly to some, money to others, and movie options to a misguided few. That's funny. A dichotomy less often discussed is the division between those who are comfortable writing emotions and those who find putting emotions on the paper repellent. The latter group values showing. To get a reader to feel what a character feels, the thinking goes, put the reader through the character's experience. Provoke emotions in readers. Don't spoon feed them feelings. Most valuable of all to this group is the capturing of moments. These are passages so honest, vivid, and true that they transcend mere words. Readers recognize the universal human condition. For other writers, telling is a positive. They go inside the mind and heart of a character to observe and feel story events just as that character does. Writing out characters' emotions is the essence of intimate storytelling. How else can you bring a character fully alive? For these authors, the highest expression of the art are passages of extended telling, in which a character's inward condition is captured in nuanced detail by means of words alone. While few authors are purists of showing or telling, most lean more in one direction or the other. Even so, most agree that showing is better than telling, in general, and most blend the two. There isn't much debate of the topic. When it comes up at writers' conferences, the issue is usually framed as a question. What's the right balance between showing and telling? Having researched, studied, and taught the handling of emotions in fiction, I have reached an altogether different conclusion. Fiction writers are asking the wrong question. Showing and telling are fine as far as they go, but the emotional experience of readers has little to do with that. The most useful question is not, how can I get across what characters are going through? The better question is, how can I get readers to go on emotional journeys of their own? Showing and telling are only part of the picture, but they are not even the most important part. As we will discover, readers may believe that they're living a story along with its characters. Actually, they're not. Readers are having their own experience that is merely occasioned by what's on the page. That experience can be elicited or not by any number of story elements: plot, setting, theme, mood, dialogue, and yes, what characters themselves feel. What the novelist is doing, though, is not causing readers to feel as a novelist does, or as his characters do, but rather inducing for each reader a unique emotional journey through a story. When you think about it, this makes sense. No two readers read a novel the same way. How could they possibly? To see how differently folks experience a work of fiction, just check their comments on Goodreads. Are those people all reading the same novel? The purpose of this book is to delve into the ways and means of creating a powerful emotional experience for readers as they read. We'll look at effective ways of showing and telling naturally, but there's much more to it than that. The dynamics of reader responses are complex. Equally complex and as varied in their effect are character arcs, journeys of self-discovery, which in turn cannot happen without ongoing emotional struggle. The language of emotion in a novel also makes a difference to readers' experiences. Plot, too, can be understood as a sequence of emotional milestones. As a writer, you are on an emotional journey as you write as well, a journey that informs and influences not only the story you are creating, but also your voice and very identity as a writer. That's actually pretty good. I like that. So, anyways, so that was this book, Emotional Craft of Fiction, Craft in the Real World, Steering the Craft. There's apparently these 3 books all have the word craft in there. Like if I actually hold them up, you will see. Whoops. Like, yep. I suppose it's hard to get away from the word craft when you're talking about writing better fiction or stories. And Soul of the Night, this is the astronomy book that I got, which, by the way, is very closely reminiscent of actually my favorite book, which is the Dream of Spaceflight. So when I bought The Dream of Spaceflight many years ago, I think this book was also recommended, but I did not purchase that at the time, and now I have. So I'm going to see how these two stack up with each other. That should be interesting. All right. With all that said, I'm going to end it for now. This has been quite interesting, and I'm sure I'm going to read an actual fiction book soon for anybody's interest. So, or a poem and such. Take care.